What's going on, everybody? Elliot Shorr-Parks here with Matt Lombardo. New episode of the No-Huddle Show. And for some of you guys that have listened to us for a while, you know that before we were lucky enough to have Matt come on, back in the days when the podcast was just getting started, it was just me and Mark Eckel. So we have Mark Eckel here today. For those of you who don't know Mark, he covered the team. He's probably covered more Eagles games than anybody in the history of this franchise. How long have you covered him, Mark? And welcome to the podcast. Welcome back, I should say.
Yeah, thanks. 32 years. So I tried to count the games up once, and I forgot what number it was. It was a lot, though.
Yeah, here's the only thing that you need to know about Mark Eckel, in addition to him covering the team for decades upon decades. He's written multiple books about the Eagles on top of everything he used to write for the Star Ledger and NJ.com. And his most recent book, The Big 50, is such a hit that even my wife couldn't put it down last summer. Wow. So that's a testament to the writer that Mark Eckel is and was.
Wow, I'm glad your wife enjoyed it. Wow, great. And then it's a great book to buy now with the Eagles in the Super Bowl. I'm hoping sales go up.
Exactly.
So I didn't miss a game from 88 through 2005, home or away, preseason or postseason. So that's
so
my
go. And then me and Matt were both lucky enough to work with Mark over the last 2 years or so, I would say.
Right.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, Mark. So the first question I have to ask you is, so how do you feel about the fact that you retire and the first team to retire the Eagles? Yeah, they're back in the Super Bowl.
Well, I'd feel really bad if they never went to one when I was there. So at least they know did go to one when I was there. So that's what actually my cousin sent me a thing on Facebook last week saying, yeah, they just needed to get rid of you to get this far. And I said, hey, wait a minute. I've been to 5 NFC camps. They've gotten this far with me. So it's not like, they never made the playoffs when I wasn't there. But if they had never gone, I might feel a little like insecure or something. But they're playing the same team. So and they're playing. You know what? I kind of knew the Eagles were going to go to the Super Bowl when I found out it was in Minnesota. Because the Eagles only go to Super Bowl like throughout 1980 because it wasn't what it is now. But I mean through the last many years, right? Super Bowls have been in Arizona. They've been in New Orleans. They've been in Miami. They've been in Los Angeles, San Diego. Yeah, right. Where did the Eagles go? Jacksonville and Minnesota. Right? Probably the two worst places to have a Super Bowl. But anyway, at least they're there, and that's the big thing.
Yeah, and I think that, Mark, there are a lot of parallels that you can draw from that 04-05 team and this team going into a Super Bowl against the Patriots. And, Elliot and I talked about it a little bit, that team back then, they weren't prepared for, even though there were 4 NFC championship games up to that point, they weren't prepared for everything that was the Super Bowl with the extended halftime. The second half seemed to really take a lot out of the Patriots. I know that, Spygate might have played a thing or two into that. But this team, there are 7 players on this roster that have won Super Bowls. Chris Long and LeGarrette Blount were there last year. How much better prepared do you think that experience from those veterans might make this particular group over the group that you covered in Jacksonville?
Well, I thought that team was ready, to be honest with you. I mean, they handled it. They handled that week pretty well. I remember Saturday night before the game, sitting in the hotel lobby with Corey Simon. It was just he and I in a little booth. They were ready. They were ready to play. What I remember most about why they didn't win that game was just mistakes made during the game. A penalty here, a drop pass there, an interception somewhere. I mean, they were. I mean, I don't think I think they handled that week pretty well mentally. So I don't think that 80. Now going from I didn't cover 80. I'm not that old, but guys I talked to, Ray Didinger and even guys on that 1980 team, Bill Berge, those guys, they weren't ready. They were not ready for the Oakland Raiders in 1980. They beat the Cowboys, and that was the Super Bowl to them. Beating the Cowboys was something they rarely done. The Cowboys kind of owned them back through all those years. So when they beat the Cowboys in 80, playing the Raiders was almost like an afterthought. So that team, but I think the 04 team, I think they just got a little. I'm going to rip Andy Reid now a little bit, but
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, welcome back.
Well, thanks. Right. They did get out coached. I mean, Belichick and his people did a better job than Andy and his people that they took Westbrook right out of the game, which was a big deal. Westbrook had a great season. I still think he's a great player. But New England was definitely concentrated on number 36. They weren't going to let him do anything that day, and the Eagles really didn't respond well. And then New England in the second half, kind of like you said, the long halftime, that's an advantage to the coach that adjusts better, and they adjusted better. So that was that.
So the question I wanted to ask you, and me and you still talk, but I made a point of not talking to you.
Haven't you already asked me everything?
Yeah, I was going to say. But I made a point of not talking to you since the Vikings game because I wanted to get your take on the podcast. But so I guess it's a two-part question. My first would be, and I think I'm going to know the answer to this a little bit, but how surprised are you that A, they're in the Super Bowl, and B, what'd you think of Foles' performance against the Vikings? Are you a believer in Foles now?
Well, let me say this first. You nailed it, and I texted you, I think, halftime of the game saying you really, and I'm not just saying this because we're on a podcast, because you did get my text.
Right.
You and I did talk prior to my game, and I wasn't sure. You kept asking me who I like. I was going back. I didn't pick the game. I don't have to, so I didn't, and I didn't bet the game. I didn't like the game. I didn't go either. Well, actually, I did. I teased the Eagles up to 9.5. I figured that was pretty safe. And I teased the Patriots down to 2, so that worked out pretty well. But I didn't like the game, and you were so confident. And to be honest, you probably got me off the Vikings. As confident as you were that the Eagles were going to play well, and that, to use your headline, Case freaking Keenum wasn't going to beat the Eagles, and he was terrible. Case Keenum looked every bit of the backup quarterback thrust into a role that he wasn't ready for. Mm-hmm. Whereas Nick Foles looked like Joe Montana. So, I mean, that was the game. That was the game right there. And I do think, and I hate to put anything on one play in a football game because there's 80-something plays in a game. I hate to put it all, but the Vikings are up 7-0. They have the ball near midfield. Patrick Robinson's interception in return for a touchdown. I mean, from that point on, the Vikings really didn't do much of anything, and Eagles couldn't do anything wrong. So, I mean, who knows if Keenum completes that pass and they get a first down and they drive and maybe get a field goal and it's 10-0. Maybe it's still 38-10. I don't know. Maybe that's still the final. I don't know. But I just think that play more than any other thing, it just turned a whole. It got the crowd back into it. It got everything going. And again, I'm watching on TV, so I'm sure there it was even crazier. But you guys agree with that? That one play just really turned everything around?
Yeah, the Patrick Robinson interception, I think, A, it tied the game, and B, it sent the crowd into complete bedlam. I mean, you watch the game on TV, Mark, and it was a really listless effort by the defense on that first drive. 4 first downs by the Vikings. They marched right down the field, and then, Patrick Robinson intercepts the pass, and it turned the game on its ear. And I don't think that the Vikings ever got the momentum back. And then later, I mean, I touched on this with Elliot on the podcast the other day. I think that the reason why I have a lot of confidence going into a Super Bowl against the Patriots, if I'm the Eagles, is Doug Pederson's aggressiveness. I mean, you look at that flea flicker on a 1st and 10 play from the 41-yard line on your first drive of the third quarter. That's Doug Pederson to a T. And I think that while you look at the pick six as the play that changed the game, I think the play that really summed up this team and Doug Pederson as a coach was that flea flicker. And that kind of showed me that he was the anti-Reed, and he's not a guy that's going to turtle up in a big game or against a coach that is on par or better than him.
What do you think? What do you think, Mark, of the job Doug's done? Because we haven't talked to you since before training camp. And I mean, really, I know I was definitely on the anti-Doug kind of bandwagon. I mean, not anti, but I was skeptical. I know you certainly had your reservations. How surprised are you by the job?
You had to be. And anyone who tells you, oh, I knew Doug Pederson was going to be, no, they're wrong. They're lying. Mm-hmm. Eagles didn't even want, come on, he was their third choice. We all know that. Right. They wanted Adam Gase. He said no. He went to Miami. They wanted a second interview with Ben McAdoo. That wasn't just to ask him what he wanted for dinner. That they were ready to. I mean, that worked. How great did that work out for the Eagles? They forced the Giants to hire McAdoo, who turned out to be bad, and he's fired already. And then they got Pederson, who turns out to be great. So I mean, just imagine that. Imagine if just imagine the whole world would be different, right? But maybe the Giants are in the Super Bowl now instead of the Eagles. But no, I mean, again, and I don't want to be like Mike Lombardi and say Doug was the worst hire in 30 years, but it was a off the wall. No other. I mean, there were 7 jobs open, I believe, that year, if I'm not mistaken.
Nobody else interviewed him.
nobody even interviewed him. He wasn't even
No.
on anybody's list for even a rumor of an interview. So, I mean, yeah, Lurie took a big gamble there, and it paid off. And sometimes it does. I mean, and to Doug's credit, I mean, the guy, and again, you guys I'm not there this year. Last year, you saw some things. You saw good and bad last year. You saw aggressiveness, but sometimes maybe too aggressive, going for it sometimes when he probably should have punted or whatever. Mm-hmm. But that's okay. If you're going to be consistent with it, and he's been very consistent with it this year, and he's been smarter this. I think he learned a little bit from last year, obviously. What I think his biggest strength is, though, is nothing bothers him. He doesn't get, if it doesn't work, because every time you go for it's not going to work. I mean, that's I don't care who you are or what players you are. Things always don't. It doesn't bother him. He'll still do it. He does. That was Andy's problem. Andy would run the ball and gain a yard. Okay, we're not running the ball anymore. We only gained a yard. Stuff like that. He was so stubborn in certain ways. And that's the biggest fallacy. When everybody thought Doug Pederson was going to be Andy Reid 2.0, he's as far from Andy Reid as anybody could possibly be from anyone else.
Yeah, and let me just ask you one quick thing about that, Mark, because if you remember back to his introductory press conference, he gave a really bizarre answer about how he would have handled the AFC playoff game differently when he was the offensive coordinator of the Chiefs. And I think it had something to do with the onside kick, giving the ball back to Tom Brady. It seems like it's been a complete 180 reversal in terms of his in-game play calling, his in-game personality as a head coach. What do you make of that? Because it's easy to sit there during that press conference and say, as you just said, this is Andy Reid 2.0, but he's completely shed that label through the course of this season. Was that just him covering for Andy Reid, or has he grown that much in 2 years into the role here?
I think he was very nervous that first press conference. Again, looking back now that I'm outside, you can look at things a little differently. Because, again, last year I thought he handled his press conferences. Sometimes he may just scratch your head with what he said, but he gives good answer. I mean, he answers. Andy wouldn't even answer questions a lot of times. Andy gave injuries, and that was it. I mean, whereas Doug gets the injuries wrong. So he's so different than Andy. The only thing Andy ever gave us was injuries. Andy was pretty on top of injuries. If Andy said a guy wasn't going to play, he didn't play. If Andy said, yeah, I'm pretty sure he's going to play, he played. Doug gets that wrong sometimes, which is fine. I mean, okay, who knows, right? But he's very. I said this about Doug last year, Elliot. I said it to you 100 times over the course of the year. There were times I wanted to go in there and just tear into him, and he would say stuff. And you did. He's the most likable guy I've been around coaching. He's a likable man. He really is. It's hard not to like Doug Pederson.
So speaking of guys that maybe we've all been surprised by, I know Matt and I have talked throughout the season about the moves Howie Roseman's made. Matt wrote early on that he should be executive of the year. You've always been, and I think fairly so, anti-Howie. What's your take on that? I mean, do you think you were wrong about Howie? What's your take on the job Howie's done this year?
Yeah, he did a nice job.
I know that pains you to say.
Yeah, well, hockey during the Super Bowl. I mean, everybody from Jeffrey Lurie to the last guy on the team, who you said was Isaac Samalo today, to the practice squad guys, everybody did a good job. You don't get to the Super Bowl without everybody doing a good job. So you can't. No one on the Eagles or Patriots should be criticized right now. They're in the Super Bowl. They're at the ultimate game. So I don't think Howie woke up and got smarter though. I mean, Joe Douglas, I think, deserves a lot of credit, and I don't want to I don't want to take everything away from Howie, but Howie. Let's look at Howie without Joe Douglas and Howie with Joe Douglas, and you draw your own conclusions from.
No,
that.
I agree, and I think that where Joe Douglas deserves a lot of the credit. And let me know if you agree with this or not, Mark. I think that the talent acquisition throughout the course of this draft. I mean, you look at Derek Barnett, 5 sacks, monumental play in the NFC title game, high ceiling pick in Sidney Jones, the connection with Alshon Jeffrey, bringing in Tim Jernigan. I think from a talent acquisition standpoint, we have to give a lot of credit to Joe Douglas. But my thought on Howie Roseman is you really saw him this year adopt the strategy of bringing in free agents that could be here long-term, like an Alshon Jeffrey, and they flipped middle-round draft picks for young players that could be part of the core, such as Ronald Darby, such as Jernigan, and they've locked up their young players, like Lane Johnson, like Zach Ertz, like Jernigan, like Jeffrey to long-term deals. That feels like a really sustainable business model for this team to have sustained success. And that's not anything that Howie Roseman really did when Chip Kelly was here even before that.
Sure he did. He always signed guys to long-term deals.
Well, they didn't flip the draft picks for, say, 24-year-old cornerbacks or for a defensive tackle with Pro Bowl potential.
See, but I don't know if I agree with that because Howie, I think before Chip got here, was always kind of a go-for-it guy. Yeah. I mean, he had the dream team. Like, I can't think of specific examples in terms of trading picks. But
Howie loves the trade. Howie loves – he's
made more trades than anybody else since –
ever in the history of football. He loves doing that. He's a fantasy player. I hate to use – I don't mean that necessarily in a bad way, but he likes doing that. He loves that whole trade this for that and move up, move down, do all that. I'm anxious to see what they do this draft because he's very limited in what he can do with with no two. But Elliot, you and I had this discussion just talking. I think they trade out of – especially now that they're either going to pick 31 or 32. I think he gets out of the first round and tries to get a second and a third for his first.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all. But I think one move obviously that's made all these Howie moves look a lot better is the trade up for Wentz. I know you watch a lot of Packers games, so you're used to seeing good quarterback play. And you saw a lot of Eagles games this year too. How impressed were you with Wentz, and where do you think he kind of ranks now? I mean, we used to have this debate all the time on the podcast. Where does he rank in terms of, assets and quarterbacks? And Matt would rather have Khalil Mack. So
that's not true. That's not true. That's not true at all. It was. Yeah, just to clear that up, Mark, I was put on the spot out of nowhere, and Elliot says, "Who would you trade Carson Wentz for?" And I this was in like week 4, and I said, "Well, maybe Matt Ryan or Khalil Mack." It's not as if I would, and that was an on-the-spot type deal. I thought we were all saying who we would trade Carson Wentz for. Obviously, seeing what he's developed into, I don't think there's a player in the league that you would deal him for outside of maybe a healthy Aaron Rodgers.
Well, it depends if your team's ready. I mean, Aaron's 34. And Carson's 24, so you're giving up 10 years. I don't know. Would you trade him for Nick Foles? The way Nick Foles is right now. That's what I want to ask you guys about. If they win, and I think they got a very good. I mean, I know the Patriots are favored, and they're favored because they're the Patriots. But if the Eagles win the Super Bowl, if Nick Foles wins the Super Bowl, what do you do with him?
Well, here's a good question. So we talked about this on the last podcast, and you'll really appreciate this. This is a good hypothetical. But, all right, so let's say they win the Super Bowl.
Right.
And you would know the answer to this question more than anybody, having covered the team for as long as you have. Do they retire Nick Foles' number?
They might retire him. I mean, I don't know.
What do you think? I mean, like, where does he rank them? Me and Matt were debating this.
That's what I'm saying to you. Can they just cast him aside if he wins? Especially what if he's MVP? What if he goes out and plays the same game he played against the Vikings?
Well, I think there's two ways to look at it, Mark. I think that number one, it all depends on what your medical staff says about the status of Carson Wentz, right? If he's fine, ready to go week 1, then Carson Wentz is the guy, and you try to flip Nick Foles for a second-round pick or a first-round pick like you did Sam Bradford.
See, but do you think? All right, and Mark, and I'll ask both you guys. Mark first. What do you think his trade value would be? Because I kind of don't think it's going to be as high as other people do.
You can get
a first-round pick for Sam Bradford.
Yeah, but I think the difference is, and look, as Mark will remember from our days of the podcast, I'm not a Sam Bradford guy, but I think the difference is Bradford is viewed as
No, the difference was because Teddy Bridgewater broke his leg 11 days from the regular season in the Vikings.
That's going to happen again.
Right, exactly. That's what I mean.
All right, but what I'm saying is, if you're let's say you guys if the Eagles were in a situation where they didn't have Carson Wentz, and we're watching what Foles is doing, and we're discussing that, would you guys give up a first for Nick Foles?
Who am I?
Depends on my situation.
I make up whatever situation you want. What I'm saying though is, I don't think Nick Foles is going to fetch a first round pick.
I didn't think Bradford would either.
Right. I mean, anything can happen. I wouldn't trade him for the sake of trading him, but if you can replicate that strategy, there are going to be injuries, right? I mean, look, even this year, Deshaun Watson goes down in like week 4. If you're sitting there holding Nick Foles, if you're the Texans, wouldn't you give up a second-round pick for a reigning Super Bowl MVP?
If you're the Texans, I mean, you have Deshaun Watson, but like the Broncos. But the Broncos might be a team that would make some sense. And I really have my boy Paxton Lynch on there, who I'm clinging on to hope for. But I mean, obviously, it's not.
That's unbelievable.
They may draft the guy. I think it's more like a team like Matt's. Like let's say I don't know, a good team, a very good team.
Aaron Rodgers gets hurt again in training camp.
Yeah.
Right. Matt Stafford gets hurt in Detroit. I mean,
Right.
I think that's the scenario. The scenario isn't you flip him in March for a 3rd-round pick because that's what a team like the Broncos comes offering. You hold him to trade chip until training camp when somebody goes down.
You got to know when Wentz is healthy too.
Right.
The worst thing the Eagles could do is trade Foles in March for a draft pick now, and then find out Wentz isn't ready. They won't know if Wentz is ready by April. They'll know by July, probably, right? I mean, on how his rehab goes and all that. And I mean, he could or could not be ready. There's a worst case scenario. Wentz could miss half a year, right?
Right. And the other component to this is, for what it's worth, if you trade Foles, you do open up about $6 million in salary cap space. And I also think we're going on the assumption, although I'm not so sure how much losing the Super Bowl would have an impact. If he is a Super Bowl MVP, I think there's obviously more pressure to keep him. But in terms of his value, what he did against the Vikings that game, I think already kind of upped it enough. Like, I think there'll be teams out there.
Yeah, but come on, Elliot, this is what he's done for me lately. If he goes out and plays against the Patriots the way he played against the Raiders.
Yeah, all right. But let's say he goes out there and he throws 1 touchdown, no interceptions, and 250 yards.
That's good in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I'd say so against the Patriots. Yeah.
If they lose the game, you're saying.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying, though, is like if 2 reasons. One, if the Eagles lose the Super Bowl, then I don't know how much impacts Foles' trade value, but the fact that you would open up $6 million in cap space, I think would be attractive to the Eagles.
You got to know what is healthy. You got to know. You can't
just trade him willy-nilly.
They do really like Nate Sudfeld. I'm just throwing that out there.
You wrote a story saying that they should play him.
Yeah, I was wrong about that, but they do like Sudfeld a lot.
He might have been good too. They didn't play him, but I'm not sure.
How much do you think of Foles' success is Foles, and how much is Doug?
A little bit of both. Obviously, Doug has something to do with it. But Nick, let's go back. Nick was pretty good in 13, right? 27, that's the old 27-2. And what they're doing,
and even in the playoffs, he threw for 195 yards and a touchdown and no picks, right? So I think what's really happened here is Nick Foles has, blossomed into what he was in 2013 over the last 2 weeks. And part of that is Doug Pederson has gone back and, they went to some of those run pass options. They're running the ball more effectively. They're getting great line play, and they're running routes that Nick Foles is comfortable with. They've really tailored the offense around him.
Like I started to say, Doug deserves a lot of credit. Obviously, just like Sean McVay deserves a lot of credit for Jared Goff getting better. Or, every quarterback needs a coach to help them along the way, I would think. Some are just very good, but even the great ones sometimes don't get coached as well, and that's why they don't hit their peak. But Nick still has to make the throws. Doug can't go out there and throw the ball. Well, you wouldn't want. I saw Doug throw the ball. You don't want Doug to throw the ball for him. But
to kind of get back to Wentz, because I really do want to have the listeners get your opinion on this. What'd you see from him this year? Obviously, do you think he was NFL MVP? How confident do you think Eagles fans can be in him going forward? And how much does that knee injury scare you?
A lot. It scares me a lot because medical it's come so far. So that's the good thing. When guys got hurt like that 20 years ago or 30 years ago when I first started covering it, was very, oh my God, ACL. Who knows if he'll ever be good again. They've come a long way with that. But I hope he doesn't. And I don't even want to bring this up, but Sam Bradford since we were talking about him, Sam Bradford was a number 1 pick of the draft, right? Coming out of Oklahoma. Yeah. Heisman Trophy winner. Had all the accolades. Had a good rookie year. Won Rookie of the Year. Had a similar year to Carson Wentz's rookie year, right? 7-9, same record. Although he won Rookie of the Year. He had a good, then he tore his knee. And then he tore it again. And, not that, and God forbid, he does, and I don't wish any ill will. Carson Wentz seems like the nicest guy in the world. I don't want anything bad to happen to him. But you don't know. Once you're injured, you're injured. What I'm saying? You can't undo your ACL. Yeah. It's torn. So, but I think that
what impacts him the most is what made him so special was his escapability from the pocket, his ability to extend plays on the run and throw on the run and run for first downs on 3rd and 8. That injury, depending on how you recover from it, there's the physical, element to it. And there's the mental confidence and comfort to throwing yourself back out there, and there's also the element of, do you want him taking those same risks, knowing what can happen when you're diving for that extra yard. And if you are okay with that, you have to go into it saying, okay, don't adapt and don't change. But you as a franchise have to be comfortable with the possibility of him not being available for 16 games. And your boy, Chip Kelly, always said the best ability is availability. And I don't know now after this injury that Carson Wentz can replicate his same style of play and be available for a whole season.
Well, you guys know him way better than I do because you're around him all. I was only around him his rookie year, and they kind of kept him away. They probably still keep him away. But mentally, how do you think he'll react? I mean, that's a big part of it. Physically, I mean, his knee, it's going to heal. It's going to be, that'll be just like Bradford's. It'll heal, and he'll be able to play football again. But will he mentally be worried about that knee, do you think?
To me, I think it is a concern because one of Wentz's best qualities is his ability to navigate the pocket and keep his eyes down the field and not worry about oncoming pressure. He takes hits, and it's not so much the fact that he takes hits when he knows they're coming. It's the fact that he doesn't let pressure rattle him. And, I would say this about anybody that got hurt. It has nothing to do with Wentz's mentality as opposed to anybody else. Human nature is you hurt your knee like that and you're around, 8 guys that are 350 pounds, you're going to think about it a little bit. Now, maybe by week 7 or 8, that's something that he gets over. But I do think that if he's rattled initially and he gets hit and it hurts and he doesn't get off to a good start, I mean, how could you not think about it? For as much as I was critical of Bradford, I mean, how could he ever be the same player afterwards?
See, I think it goes the other way. I think that he didn't make it, even after throwing his shoulder down in Carolina along the goal line and taking an unnecessary hit that Doug Pederson and Frank Reich both pointed out of, hey, next time maybe don't do that. I think that unfortunately for Carson Wentz, and this is kind of what made him such a special player, is I think he's still going to play the same way. I think he's still going to play with reckless abandon out there. And, he might benefit from changing his style of play and maybe evolving into more of a pocket passer and a pocket threat versus being that more of a dual threat guy. But if you limit those, plays on the run, is he the same special quarterback? That's the unknown. And Mark, would love to get your thoughts on that, because I think that in order for self-preservation, I think Wentz has to adapt, but I don't know how much he changes as a quarterback if he does.
Yeah. Well, I remember I'm going to go way back in my memory bank now to Randall Cunningham. You guys were young then, but in 1990, right? Pops hit, knocked him out, and Rich Kotite was Eagles head coach then, and he kind of put it on Randall. Like, he went that other way. He didn't want Randall. He tried to mold him into a pocket passer, and that's when Randall. He drew up those hats. I don't know if you guys remember this. I'm
still scrambling.
I'll be back scrambling. Yeah. So Randall took offense to that whole. I'm not this is what I do. If you don't want me to do it, then get rid of me.
Donovan went the complete other way.
Right. Well, Donovan always had that. I'm not a running quarterback.
Right.
Even though he was. I mean, he was good and he was good at it. But Randall knew what he was good at. Randall had an arm like nobody I've ever seen, but he could also. Randall ran for almost 1,000 yards one season. He had 940 something, I don't know, and then didn't play the second half of the last game of the season, which still bothers him. But if you can't take away what Carson Wentz, you can't take away half his game. I don't think, can you? I mean, then he's still good, but he's not special if he's not doing those like you said, Matt. Some of his greatest plays came on 3rd and long where he got away from what looked like a sure sack and made a great play out of it.
So, we talked about Doug, talked about Howie, talked about Carson. The Eagles do play a game in 2 weeks. So what's your prediction on this game? How do you see it playing out? I know it's tough. It's a tough one to pick, but what do you maybe think some keys are, and how much of a chance do you think the Eagles have? Or do you think
Eagles have a very good chance. I mean, I don't want to say
they have a better chance than they did in 04? Or I guess it was 05, but
yeah, I thought, I'm going to say I picked them to cover in that. The line was 7, I think, then that year, 6 or 7, and they did cover. And I think that's all I'm going to give you right now. I think the Eagles will cover. Will they win? I'll text you as we get closer to the game, Elliot. You could say it on that.
All right. What do you think some keys are?
Well, not letting Brady go wild. Obviously, they can't let Tom Brady be great. I mean, Brady's not going to
give Tom Brady the ball with a minute and a half left, winning or losing.
Yeah, exactly. Or at least down 2 scores, so he can't. Start quickly. Obviously, I mean, you don't want to fall behind. Although the Eagles have fallen behind both playoff games, haven't they?
Yep.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Right.
And the Patriots fall behind her. I mean, the Patriots fell behind big in the Super Bowl. They fell behind, fairly big to Jacksonville. So,
but I'm just saying that. So you don't want to get the Patriots have shown they can come back, and so have the Eagles to a smaller extent. But I just the Super Bowl is a crazy game, and that like you said earlier, you don't know how teams react that whole week. It's a crazy week. It's nothing that you can. But the Patriots are used to it. They've been there 3 to 4 years. Right?
I think that's a big advantage.
A little bit, it is. But I mean, the Eagles have to play. I mean, listen, I'm not around this year, so I'm way more surprised than you guys are that the Eagles are in the Super Bowl. I mean, if you asked, and you probably did ask me back in September or August, I would have told you no. The Eagles. There's no way the Eagles are going. I mean, I don't think anybody picked them to go to the Super Bowl. You picked them to the East, and I thought that was like, and they could. I think a wild card might be more realistic, but no one had them in the Super Bowl. Whereas everybody had New England in the Super Bowl. I mean, if you didn't pick New England to go to the Super Bowl, it's because you were just trying to be different, or you were looking for an upset, maybe with Pittsburgh or Oakland or somebody like that. But the majority, New England was the favorite to win the AFC from whenever. I mean, they were the favorite. The Eagles were. I don't even know what the odds were opening day on them going to the Super Bowl, but it was very high. So there is that. I mean, but with that said, they're there, and I hate this whole dog thing. I think it's kind of childish a little bit. But if it works for you, keep doing it. And it seems to be working. They love this whole we're the underdog image. So they'll play that to the hill. The worst thing that could have happened was for Jacksonville to win, and maybe the Eagles may have been a favorite in that game. And then they couldn't use that. Then they couldn't use that anymore and again, you guys are there. I'm just watching it on TV and reading about it on NJ.com. I mean, they really taken this whole role, right? I mean, this team seems to be one that relishes this kind of stuff. Like, we're the underdogs, and everybody counted us out when Carson got hurt, and nobody gives us. They really seem to really seems to work for them.
Yeah, it does, and I think they'll be wearing those masks in Minnesota. I think they're still think nobody believes in them, even though I think a fair amount of people might actually end up picking them. But you'll have to text me your pick and let us know, because I'm sure the readers are going to want to know for sure.
I'm not picking. It's way too soon.
I know, but when you do,
if the smart people listening who are going to put money on the game, I'm telling you right now, I will if I had to put money down today, I would take the 5.5.
All right, There you go, guys. That's the vote of confidence Eagles fan wanted to hear. So
I'll take 5. I'm not taking the money line yet, but I'm taking the 5.5.
All right. Well, look, we really appreciate you taking time to come on and do this.
Have a good time in Minnesota. Dress warm. I covered the only other Super Bowl played in Minnesota back in whatever year it was, the Redskins, and
that was when people's cars wouldn't start in the parking lot, correct?
It was just I've never been colder.
So cold, yeah. Hey,
I think I'm going to buy a winter.
Please do me a favor and hit a golf course or two for me and get a couple rounds in.
Yeah, it was. Well, I can't now. I just had some. I had a little bit of operation done yesterday, so I'm on the IR for a couple of weeks. But after that, I will. But it's going to be cold, guys. That's all I'm going to tell you. It's Minnesota in February is not a pleasant place to be unless you're going to the Super Bowl, I guess, right?
Well, the good news is we always bring the heat on this podcast, so we don't have to worry about it being cold.
Well, you always you bring the heat everywhere you go.
That's what I'm saying, right? Exactly. So we'll be good to go. So, all right, Mark, thanks so much for coming on, and we'll talk to you later.
All right, take care.
All right, and for the No-Huddle Show listeners, we will be having another podcast this week. Hopefully, we're working on that. But thanks again to Mark for coming on, and thanks everybody for listening. Matt, I will talk to you soon.
See you guys soon.